Go live. And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the FreudenFreude weekly podcast, where we bring you content to make you grow and develop as a person, but also as a leader.
Hi, I'm Sandra Corona.
And I am Claudia. And we
are
coaches.
Coaches.
Let's not forget that that's actually quite often the angle that we are going to come from.
Yes,
Go ahead, Sandra.
correct. So I am a coach for leaders, for young professionals, and for the neurodiverse community.
And I work with professionals, corporate leaders, and their teams in tech and beyond. So today's topic is centered around resilience. It's part of our resilience series. And as we were discussing potential topics to explore, we thought that it might be interesting to talk about building a strong support network, or just support in general. And do you have any experience with that, Sandra?
So I laugh. Yeah, I laugh because I'm just coming out from an experience that really brought my family to a breaking point. And I mean this, my mother and my siblings. My mom, and I've posted about this if you've read what I've been posting about aging parents, it says how important it is to be in the same purpose and the same goal. And I was noticing that with this move that my mom was making, it was a life move. Okay, she was moving from the house that she has lived in for 40 years 50 years, I'm sorry, to a new city, a smaller city, a city where she knows only my brother, his wife, and the children. And it's the process in itself required for us as siblings to come together. And I noticed how out of touch all of us were with the expectations that we had. So building resilience when it comes to helping an aging parent to move requires, the first thing that I was taught in my coaching practice was designing an alliance, which was to improve communication with your siblings. That was to make sure that you understood your boundaries, you knew where were your values, where were your limits, all of these things that are important to you, but the same respecting their values, their boundaries, and so on and so on. So I learned this as a first step, and you have no idea how that simple first step made a huge difference. And that created for me resilience, because it brought to me peace of mind that we were all in the same boat. The only problem was that we were, what's it called?
Rowing in different directions.
Rowing in opposite directions. So one of us wanted to, go this way and the other this way and the other. And then until we finally understood what was most important to all of us, that is when we finally stopped the bickering and the pettiness and all this attitude that comes from years of nurturing this kind of behavior. It suddenly became nothing, and we only focused on helping my mom to move.
There you go. There you go. And actually, what you mentioned here, this discussing and building of an alliance is actually step one that we do with teams in general in the team coaching world. It goes under different groups, team alliance, ground rules, whatever the name is that you put to it. But it's just like what are we actually here to achieve, and how are we going to go about it in terms of communication, in terms of contribution, in terms of I need this to exist in this bubble that this team or these people exist in order for this to go smoothly. And we will, in that case, be able to support each other. Things like when to ask for help, when to offer help, when to point out things that, might be suboptimal and could be improved on, and so on, and doing it in a safe space. And, that touches on what is a very hot topic right now in general, which is psychological safety. You have to create a space that allows for these kind of exchanges so that the essential work can be done. And so kudos for you. I agree. It's very interesting. And sometimes actually, as we start to talk about, support network, is just even coming clear about what does support mean.
Correct.
What does
Correct.
support mean? Does it mean offering a shoulder to cry on? Does it mean putting in elbow grease and doing actual manual labor? Is it financial thing? Is it just a silent presence? Goes a long way, people. The silent presence, just I am here, whatever you need, I am here, without necessarily having so much action attached to it a priori. It might develop as the situation develops, but just being there so that the person feels that, in this case, your mother, who was going through this move, that she felt, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
Correct.
Exactly.
So for me, you just mentioned something very important. Sorry to interrupt here on what you were saying. But support, when you have family that is far away, like in my case, in my sister's case, and in my brother's case, all three of us were, I was the one that was furthest away. But in the final point, without judging, is that none of us could travel to help her in the move. And guess who stepped up? My sister-in-law. She, oh my God, she surprised me, and she crumbled all my perceptions, beliefs, everything I had about her. Now, I know that one action is not enough, but I've been gathering the little heres and theres, and I've come to the conclusion that I did not give her the opportunity to communicate with all of us clearly. Like, we were preventing her from communicating, right? And so support now extends to my brother's family and to my sister's family. So now we're all coming together, but it doesn't mean that we're all mixed, right? When it comes to family matters, family is family. When it comes to, a microorganism as a family, then okay, then we include everybody else.
Right.
But support is important.
Yes.
Definitely.
And so, I think that's maybe one of the tips out of this. By extension, like, don't limit by your own assumptions who you might consider a person of support,
Mhm.
or an organization of support, or whatever. They might come out of the woodwork, when asked, or when facing the challenge. And when we put this in again in a maybe more workplace scenario, is like, have you even considered, rather than just your teammates, some key stakeholders,
Mhm.
some bosses, some colleagues a little bit further removed in the organization? the obvious is always obvious. Oh yeah, it's like it's the work that us four or us 14 or us 40 have to do. So, that's the pool of support or that we can find. But very often, maybe cast a wider net as you think about who to talk about this, and you might be surprised. You might be surprised.
Well,
Yeah, go
part
ahead.
of, oh, I'm sorry. So part of resilience is is obviously support, but then what support does is that it fosters trust, right? And so that is one of the many steps that help you build resilience. So I just wanted to interact that, about trust, about uh, strengthening the trust between you and the ones you love, right? And um, if we think about it, trust is the foundation of a healthy relationship, not only with yourself, but with those around you. Um, Thought I would, you know, put that in there because again, it's part of one of the many steps to building resilience.
And that is actually what this vehicle of the alliance actually is supposed to create. First of all, an environment of psychological safety, but then also, emanating from that is actually the trust, right? And so, good point, absolutely, because, we have to forget that there's always, let's say the protagonist, the person going through the biggest challenge. Sometimes it can be a team going through a really big challenge. Sometimes it can be an organization going through a really big challenge, right? So the question is, there's this protagonist, if we just use this umbrella term, and when these moments happen that resilience needs to come forth and be deployed, when we hit these roadblocks, when it's really, really challenging, we are fragilized. An organization is not at its best. A team is bound to get into a moment of conflict, maybe even, or desperation. Okay, it is very, very real. And in my philosophy, at least, it's important that there also be external advocates sometimes, because the fragilized protagonist, who's really getting hit from all sides or overloaded or overwhelmed, is not always in a position to ask for help, to even sometimes figure out really what the biggest challenge is currently in this overall, symphony of issues that they live in. And that is something that we have to understand as people that would like to give support, that we can't wait necessarily to be asked. We can't wait to be directed, because the one that needs it most is the one least capable of doing it.
Right.
Let me flip that around. If I'm the one, if I'm the protagonist, I have to understand that if there's a situation on the horizon where all things can just fall apart, I shouldn't wait for that moment to ask for help and to build my support network. It should be done proactively before the hits the proverbial fan. Okay? Because when that happens, we are in no condition to do this. Case in point, somebody is sick, somebody is getting sicker. Don't wait until you're in the hospital to start, bringing up the issue, oh, I might really need some support. Okay?
Yes.
Try to bring it up while you still have some of your wits around you, to set these things in motion. Like you said, families with aging parents. a crisis hopefully doesn't occur, but the likelihood is high, right? So don't wait until the moment of crisis to discuss those things, but
Yes.
bring it up before. So building a support network, I think, is in everybody's best interest if it is kind of a very normal modus operandi of life. That would be like the preferred way. It's like, okay, these are the people I can really count on. These
Mhm.
are things that, these are maybe organizations that I can rely on that can give me help. So it, it really, like, waiting for the moment that we are in peak need of resilience is not the moment to do this. Of course, sometimes you have to because it was so unexpected or whatever. But giving thought a priori about who can catch you when you fall is really important. And again, this is at so many levels. This is at the level of an individual, a family, a group, a team, an organization, but also a country, or the world at large. It's like at every this kind of, I think, is a, a thing that we shouldn't overlook at any kind of systemic level. Know who you can count on. Know who will catch you when you fall, and hopefully there will be some. Hopefully there will be some. Sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes it's not clear. I mean, some people have a very, very small, connection network, or a very, very small, atomic network of strong connections and so on. And it can be scary when you can't identify anybody, but nevertheless, keeping it up and trying to see who can be there when you need him or her or it, in terms of a larger entity to help. Yeah.
You know what I think is also important to mention is that not everybody knows how to ask for help.
Yeah.
And part of knowing how, or yeah, knowing how to ask for help is understanding yourself, become self-aware of what you're experiencing. Um, you should, at this point, be understanding your emotions, but not, even though you understand your emotions, doesn't mean that at that point, due to stress, due to overwhelming, you name it, you don't necessarily know how to manage them at that moment. And so asking for help is hard still for many people because there's still this stigma of being seen and being exposed to, to the real you versus this mask that you've been living with of I can do this.
I think that there's a lot of issues around, and cultural issues, very very strong cultural
Mhm,
issues
mhm.
around pride, around losing face, around appearing weak, and so on, and being judged just in general. And it's unfortunately very I think our thing here is the stream is kind of not working correctly, but let's just continue.
Yeah.
That the it's unfortunate, I think, and culturally, when we see how people lived like 150 years ago, people knew very much so that they had to rely on each other much more. there's this whole concept that it takes a village to raise a child, and things like that. There was more of a togetherness because life was tougher, just survival was tougher, and so I think that there was more this coming together. I can also not say from personal experience at this moment how this would differ in collectivist countries, compared to individualistic countries, because I know that there's places in this world where there is still more of this. We are together in it, and there's more of an extended network. For instance, in Asia, in Africa, with the whole Ubuntu culture and so on. So it also does indeed vary quite a bit across cultures on the globe. But I know that there's some countries that where it's very, very difficult to ask for help because people, it's quite taboo still to some extent, and you have to be able to be self-sufficient and or solve things with money. But what if money is not available? Right. Yeah.
Right. You're saying something very important, and what I related with is with sharing responsibility, right? You were saying a couple of sentences before that it's important to bring in external people, right? And if you have, people that you can rely on, that have always been there for you. I think that's the most important part, when they have always been there for you, and they're the people that give you the best transformative questions, and rather than giving you the advice for free or telling you what to do and so on and so on. So, reaching out to this, sharing responsibilities with other people, with other external people, helps in distributing, the responsibilities. That's the truth. But without losing sight of what's important. So bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that shared responsibility is it's an approach that promotes responsibility for the quality of communication. And, they say that the quality of your life is the quality of your questions. And this is part of it. This is where, if you're able to ask for help, that means that your life is going on the right path towards resilience, right? Towards sharing responsibilities. And within those responsibilities, there's also the need to share the failure, the things that go wrong, and how to fix them, right? To come together now to fix them. So there's this like little chain that looks like a DNA chain, right? That's how I see it. It comes like this, or the curve, whatever you want to call it. So it's part of learning, and it's part of being one with those that help you in the way. So that's what for me came up, share responsibility. And when you share responsibility, it just feels less in your body, because that's really what hurts for me, my body, my shoulders. And it's cultural, like you were saying. I mean, you've been saying all this all along. It's cultural, and expectations, when they come from family, when they're about what you should do, what you need to do, and so on and so on, it breaks that communication. It does not foster or breach, close the gap in the communication. Rather, it steers it away, right?
The
So that's what came up.
Right, very good, very good. The Germans have an interesting word, das Wir-Gefühl, meaning the sense of being us, the sense of being us versus just me and I. And you know, to be able to get to the sense of we is extremely important. And actually, in South Korea, the word uri, which means our, or we or our, is has extreme connotations in that respect, right? And for instance, you know, when you say our house, you say our family, you say our husband, even though it's one person. But I would, you know, I would say to my husband, our husband, no, Uri Lampion, because it's like it's part of the sense of we. And you know, even though it's a normal pronoun that, you know, like you or we, yeah, it's used very preciously, very precious,
Mhm.
because until a couple that is dating for the very first time digs out this word uri to say it, you know, to say that we are this uri, we are doing this together, it's a very, very special moment. It's a deepening of the relationship. And so I think that, you know, moving towards this sense of togetherness is really quite important. That being said, let's not forget that there's a large number of people on this planet that are alone, truly alone.
Mhm.
They might not
Mhm.
have a family, they might not have external things, and we see this actually quite a bit in expats. All of a sudden, foreign land, sometimes young people by themselves, foreign lands, different culture, no existing support network. It is very, very, very tough. And in moments like this, you might need to self-rely. My tip in these situations would be find a coach, right? Because yes, you can go to your church or mosque or whatever, right? You can go through your faith. You might have an HR department that helps out with, you know, some making of connections to other people maybe that come from your country or something. You know, there might be expat communities and things like that. But you know, when you are in a moment, a fragile moment, precarious like that, I think it a coach would at least allow you to go deeper, to go
Mhm.
deeper and think deeper, because
Yep.
we had a chat yesterday about support groups, and maybe we can touch on this as well at this moment.
Yes.
But you know, a lot of people are alone, and you know, I just from my experience, a coach would be, you know, hugely competent in or you know, adequate to help a person in the moment where resilience is needed, because it just is it creates a space that holds you and where you can explore and go again from looking at a problem to seeking solutions and becoming more proactive again. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I mean, you coach expats as well. I mean, this is something that is not a surprise to you, is it?
No, no, absolutely not. You know what I do is that something that I've learned. It started with one simple phrase that my brother once said, live and let live. Okay. It started like that, just a very simple phrase. And it sounded nice, but we all know that it's not necessarily something that can happen because there's all these external factors. There's all this, you know, social interactions that we have to build and to exist and to be a part of something that we want to be a part of, right? And I, it became something that recently I learned from my coaching class, which was, you know, deepen the learning and forward the action. Okay. I don't know how I connect both, but I believe that it has to do that live and let live has to do with living the experience, and only through experience can you learn, period. Okay. With learning, there is no there's no consequences, there's no communication, there's nothing. So each one has to go together. And when I deepen the learning, I know that I'm asking the right questions so that my coachee can see beyond, what currently is limiting him or her. And then when I forward the action, it means that I am promoting, for the person to go and take action, go and do it now, just do it, like Nike says, right?
Right.
And you see the transformation in them by realizing the many perspectives and the many options that are built when we tell them there's more out there. You can actually, move forward and stop feeling stuck, because that is the problem with expats.
Yeah.
We feel stuck.
The sense of feeling stuck is a downward spiral that, it just keeps going further and further down and keeps you trapped in the spiral. And you need kind of a way to pause it so you can again find your inner center, become resourceful again,
Mhm.
re take take into account again the vision and purpose of
Yes.
project, your life, whatever it ends up being, and then essentially being in this downward spiral, but looking up and swimming again, towards where you want to go, and that then finding this motivation, this ability to take massive action in order to get out of it. And then once you're out of it, it's not always you're not always where you were before. You might, whatever you have done might have gotten lost. All the preparatory work and so on towards a project might be lost. But what didn't get lost was your learning. And I think that's also what we always should think about, that no matter how big a challenge or how excruciating a failure, and I'm using the F word here, right? But it is, what have you learned? And by the fact that you will now pull yourself up by your bootstraps and overcome this, how much has that strengthened you, for the rest of your life? It's kind of this common saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I really think that there's some truth to that, right? Because you will always be able to look back and say, oh, look at that fiasco, and I survived, and this is how I did it. And so, should a similar fiasco ever arise again, which it won't because I have learned from this experience, then, I feel like I am equipped, and that is resilience. That is resilience, and that will give you this self-confidence now to face maybe bigger challenges, and proudly go forth, as they would say in Star Trek lingo. It's just, you know the I think that this reset in the moment of resilience is it is just often a moment where you do need support, right? I mean, of course, you can do it by yourself if you're strong enough, if you have thought about resilience, if you have already a more developed mindset, to deal with these things by your own. Kudos for you, right? I mean, bravo. But for the rest of us, having external help is sometimes required, and hence the support network. Already knowing a little bit in advance, who would you talk to, or again, if you want the stronger mindset, the more resilient mindset already, get coaching to
Mhm.
explore those facets of yourself before issues arise, right? That's why people get coached. Okay, it's to build these strong inner compass, the self confidence, this ability to be a little bit more Teflon than Velcro,
Yeah.
to let things just grace to manage things a little bit more gracefully when the going gets tough.
That is absolutely the truth. Now, do you want to revisit what we were talking about yesterday?
Yeah, so we were talking about support groups.
Yeah.
Support groups obviously abound. They exist on a local level in real life, but then of course there's the whole like thing of support groups online nowadays, right? And whatever your issue, there will be a support group about it somewhere. Isn't it true?
Yes, absolutely. And
And
there's a support group for everything, everything.
everything, how to treat an ant that has broken a leg. I'm sure there's a support group about that somewhere. And poor aunt. But um, and I meant the animal, by the way. I didn't mean an aunt.
Yes.
I meant an ant.
Well, there's a group for both. So let's
I'm
consider
sure.
that as the truth.
Just the way that you can learn anything nowadays. I
Yeah.
think there's also a support group nowadays for pretty
Yeah.
much everything. But on the other hand, I really think that I mean, this is my own personal thoughts and experience. They're not all
Okay.
worth it.
Yeah.
Because I have come across support groups that were of like-minded people, maybe in a similar context, but all it was a bitch and moan fest.
Mm.
Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
have it so bad. Oh, you think you have it bad. I have it worse. And you just spend an hour just going there and lamenting about, the situation and how horrible it is and how horrible it is and so on. I find that there's value in them to the extent that people know that they're not alone. You realize there's other people in the same kind of boat, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, is it support or is it just knowing, just what's the word? I mean, just commiseration,
Mm-hmm.
commiseration, and commiseration only gets you so bad. I mean, it's sometimes cathartic to be able to scream and bitch and moan about things, but is how helpful is it to make you better, to make you
Okay.
get to the other end of things. So, and I'm not saying that commiseration shouldn't be part of a support group. It has a part, but when it deteriorates to only that, then all we're talking about is the problem. And we're not ever talking about a potential solution or a coping mechanism or,
Absolutely.
right? So have you had ever experience with that?
Yes, my experience was only with one group, and that was about 20 something years ago. And I can't even remember what it was for. But I do remember that it was messy. I remember that all I was doing was just weeping and just feeling sorry for myself. And I would see others express the same feelings. And it, it was, it was not, after a while, I realized, thank goodness I realized that it was, like you said, a bitching fest. And it was not taking me anywhere. I was just going around and around and around in circles. And when I finally was able to get out of it, I realized the potential that I had about making choices, how limiting our beliefs are when it comes to getting out of hard situations and yeah, I guess hard situations. And it was not a good experience, unfortunately. And I'm guessing that it's because there wasn't a coach or there wasn't a facilitator or trainer present, right?
Right.
That is the most important thing. Without any of these three, or psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever you choose to be present with you, without these people, you're always just going to be going around in circles.
Right.
Um,
And that is a point I absolutely want to stress, that a support group, a beneficial support group should really ideally be moderated, facilitated by a by a professional, really.
right.
Somebody who has, a good coaching background, a doctor, psychotherapist, and so on. I really think that it is important, because what is going to help is, the building of strategies, and before we talk strategies, I think it's this very real, very for me as a coach, very, very real switch from problem space, problem thinking, problem talk, to solution space,
Mm,
solution talk. And it is, there's tools that we can use, there's ways that we can frame this, that to facilitate that a little bit. Might not happen for everybody in every meeting, okay? That would be quite a wonder, but that there's a seed planted at the very least, right? That there is an alternative out there, that there's a way out,
mm,
and to become, to put efforts toward not giving up, but putting the energy into something constructive and positive and future looking and solution based, right? Like a positive intent on everything, rather
mhm,
than what we talked about earlier. This commiseration is just reinforcing negativity, or it reinforces the look at the problem,
mhm,
versus trying to come up with even just a silver lining. I mean, we're not always talking that every little positive step needs to be the one step that, is just a few steps away from like nirvana and things like that. That's not, but finding small proofs of, positivity, resourcefulness, agency, right? So that there's sometimes even small things that show that, despite all the stuff that's happening right now, I am able to do these simple things. And if I can do these simple things, oh, that feels good. Maybe I can do a little bit more of a bigger thing.
mhm,
And
mhm.
again, this can by analogy also happen in a team, right? Same
Right.
thing. It's like, rather than saying, oh, all is lost and so on, and this is not going to go anywhere. What are the small things? What can we do to get there? And this there is a positive state, a resourced state, a good outcome, a good outcome.
Right.
And
Right.
what can we do to get there? And I really think that when that happens, I mean, the sky is open, and the violins are playing and sun is shining and stuff like that. That moment, it's a very powerful cathartic moment when all of a sudden you're like, oh, this little thing in your head or in the team dynamic that says, oh, okay, so there's an alternative here,
Right.
right?
Right. As as you said, one of the most important things is to be prepared, right? Know your limits, know what are your values, right? And have it very clear what you're trying to achieve. Think ahead. That's another thing. We were talking about thinking ahead, about
I'm sorry,
preparing.
Sandra, can you move your dog a little bit further from the microphone? She is creating a lot of, we hear a lot of noise. Thank
Thank you,
you.
honey bunny. Yeah, she's something. Okay, can you hear me better?
Thank you.
Okay, sure. So another thing that we were thinking was thinking ahead. We were talking about thinking ahead. And I think that is, I like the thinking ahead. The thing about a coach, talking with a coach is to make sure that when you think ahead, you're not stuck in the future constantly, right? Because you're constantly trying to think ahead and be one step ahead of any problem or any situation. But what I want to talk about that we discussed is something a little bit more serious. And you were talking about pre-mortem. Okay. Um, can you dive a little bit into this, please?
Right. So
I think it's
a pre-mortem is a thought experiment that you do after you determine a goal that you're going to go after. And this is very often done, in a team setting, let's say in the corporate world, but it applies absolutely, to a wide variety of scenarios. And,
yes.
it's, so you have this goal. You even maybe have already established an action plan how to get there. All good. That's your plan A. But
Mm-hmm.
then you go into this thing and you say, so as we're trying to achieve this, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen? Like the absolute worst situation that could happen. Okay. And I mean, and I did role play this with people, and we went all out. I mean, the company's reputation is done. We get delisted from the stock market. And then we get found personally responsible and get sued by the competitors. And I mean, like you go really like all out to the absolute worst thing. And also in personal matters, you can really think, what's the absolute worst that can happen. And
Mm-hmm.
you try to associate with that state. Like in your thinking, you're really there. You see stuff falling apart around you. And then you allow yourself to look back, right? You look
Mm-hmm.
back, you see yourself in the past over there starting the project, starting the thing. And what you do is you ask yourself, what is the last thing that happened? The last, not the first, the last thing that happened that really was the trigger for this catastrophe to break out. What was the last thing that had to happen? And then when you have identified that or those, then you go back even one step and say, well, what caused that to happen? And so what happens is that you really see that kind of the chains that have to happen in order to lead to catastrophe as you elaborate this back and back in time. Eventually you're going to get close to the actual here and now. And so you have actually identified, and we all have blind spots, but at least you have identified some ways that things can go wrong. and you can take measures in order to keep that from happening. Right, keep that from happening. Like for instance, not in, one could be like not informing, some key stakeholder about this plan. Maybe that ultimately can put this ball in motion where, your reputation is shot and so on and so on. So you take then, into account that you actually inform this stakeholder. And it goes the same way in real life. You want to do a project to go camping with your family,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have like this, yeah, we go to this great campsite, maybe we even rent an RV, and we pack the drinks and stuff like that, and we just go. And then you just imagine that's plan A, and hopefully everything will go according to plan A. But then you go and you say, well, what's the absolute worst things that can happen? Right? What are things that really can go haywire because of your own actions? Maybe not putting gas in the car or stuff like that, right? That can happen. Or because the weather doesn't cooperate, or you get stuck in stop and go traffic, or God forbid somebody gets ill or whatever. Like, what are the worst things that can happen? And as you then look back in this chain of events that need to occur to lead to that catastrophe, you can take according action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like pre-mortems are very, very powerful, and you do them at the start, in the planning stage. It's not something you do at the end, like a post-mortem, right? Post-mortem, everybody's dead, we do a post-mortem. But this is a pre-mortem, meaning we actually think about what can make this project die, right at the beginning.
Right. And for me, it was a very serious topic because it is it it gives way to sadness, depression. It gives way to what's it called? Oh my God, I forgot. The Kubler-Ross. It's my God, I studied this. How can I forget?
The phases of grief. Yes.
Grief, exactly. That's what I was
Wow.
trying to say. Thank you. It
It's
leads to
late,
grief.
people. It's late. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's late for me. It's almost 9 o'clock for me. And so when these come in, like you said, say the worst case scenario, that your car runs out of gas because you thought you could make it, with that tank of gas, with that semi-filled tank of gas, or because, like you said, also not communicating with that stakeholder, the decisions or the, whatever is that is important for him to know, but you decided not to communicate. It becomes the death of something. And now it's time to mourn. Now it's time to make sure that, yes, you stay in the process, you stay in the moment, but also it's time to move forward, right? And it's always about taking the next step and taking action, leaning towards action. Do it now. That's what came to mind. And I think it's very important that people, that when they fail in a project, like you said, or saying the F word, when something goes wrong in a project, it's okay to feel and experience your emotions. And just to close for me the gap today, because we're a couple of minutes from ending today's conference, I was thinking, Claudia, that going back to the beginning, resilience, how living in the sadness of losing something, of working so hard on something suddenly crumbles. And now it's time to see what happened, what went wrong, live in the experience, right? Learn from the experience and move forward. That's what I
Because
wanted to say.
it is absolutely true that in change there exists grief.
Mhm.
And even if change, and I actually would like to propose this as a subject for one of our next resilience
Okay.
episodes, is that no matter what kind of change we're talking about, sometimes even change towards the better,
Mhm.
your pre-existing reference points and evaluations changed. They died.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there will be grief associated with it. It might not
Mhm.
be as terrible a grief, of course, as when a business fails, or you lose all your money, and we're not talking necessarily here about a person dying. That's grief proper, let's say, but the
Mhm.
grief of change. And it's we are going to go through these phases that the Kubler-Ross model has tried to put a framework on. There will be depression, denial, depression, bargaining,
Mm.
anger. All these things are
Yeah.
going to exist, and be nice to yourself when this happens. It's an integral part of it. It's a way that our brain tries to make sense of an altered reality. It's the work that our brain needs to do in order to find a new steady state, a new fixed state, and
Mhm.
it really can be quite sobering to see how strong these grief cycles are for things that are not person related but project related, idea
Mhm.
related. Imagine you cannot do a hobby anymore. You are going to experience grief. And oh, let's not forget about the loop some people get thrown into when they take retirement.
Mm.
They
Mm.
take
Oh my
retirement.
gosh. Yeah.
Expats moving to a different place. You think it's like a great opportunity and you're going to have like these great experiences, but guess what? You're going to be floored by grief in the first little while. And it is part of the way that your brain, your psyche needs to readjust.
Yeah.
And so I think we should definitely put this on the calendar for one of the
Yeah.
next shows, because it's an interesting point. Again, for today, if we maybe wrap it up, because yes, we managed again to do an hour. It's crazy. Um, it is important, I think. My takeaway is that it's important to have support. It's also important to give thought about resilience in general, and support in particular before you need it. Like,
Yeah.
make it part of your considerations as you plan, as you just live your life, to have clarity about where potential support could come from should you need it. And then
Mhm.
nurture that. It's not always a one-way street.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not
Yes.
always a one-way street. It's a give and take. And
Yes.
what would you have to add, Sandra?
Well, I would have to add that learn plus action leads to resilience. The more we learn and experience, the more capable we are to solving problems.
I, I agree.
And given yourself, uh, action, sorry, options. Yes, options. So, you know, some people when they don't don't learn from the experience, it simply goes to waste. And it's sad to see how they still continue to feel in a place of inaction, inefficiency, and all of these things just because they didn't take action when they took the experience, when they were taking the experience in, and they did not take action. So I think it's very important. That's my takeaway from today.
It speaks to maturity, right? It speaks to
Mhm.
becoming more mature, and the difference between having 25 years of experience or 25 times the first year of experience, where there's no growth. And we all know people like that. So
Yes.
fantastic. I think that was a nice wrapping up point here. So, thank you everybody for keeping on listening. It's
Yeah.
it's truly our pleasure. We hope that you found some nuggets of value in today's show. It was a lot
Mhm.
of fun for me. And so please, if you like what you heard, please do subscribe to the channel and maybe give us a like or a comment to this video, be it right here on YouTube or on our social media.
Yeah.
Sandra and I are both coaches. We are available to help you out should you require
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Our contact information is attached in the description to this video, or you can find us easily on LinkedIn. So I guess that's it.
That's
And
it.
that's
Good
it.
night.
Okay. We'll be back next week. Take care. Bye bye.
Good night. Bye.